Welcome back to the classroom. My name is Mr. Wong. I want to go through a particular lesson today to talk about a thing called the Haber process. Now, the Haber process, we could essentially say, is one of the most important chemical processes that humans have been able to generate in our lifetime. So I just want to dedicate this lesson to talk about why is it so special. So in our lesson today, we're going to analyze the synthesis pathway taken for the Haber process, and then we're going to evaluate some factors that influence how quickly the Haber process occurs. So this is the person we're looking at. His name is Fritz Haber. He is, so to speak, the person responsible for the production of fertilizers. He's also responsible for explosives like TNT. He has a very interesting backstory that we'll get into later on, but the thing that makes this so important is his focus, his work that he's doing is a famous process known as the Haber process, and the most important part of his work is accessing the power or the energy inside nitrogen gas. Now what you can see here, nitrogen, it is the 7th element on the periodic table. If it is by itself in its diatomic form or nitrogen gas, you'll see N2, like so. It's very stable, and we know it's very stable because our atmosphere, about almost 80% of our atmosphere, is made up of this particular gas. Okay, so it's something we find everywhere in our planet. It's also one of the fundamental elements that creates sort of our ecosystem. Now, the nitrogen cycle is incredibly important for plant growth. It's one of the main nutrients that plants need. It's nutrients that we can obtain from, the atmosphere. And as you can see in this image here, part of the way we grow plants is to use fertilizers, and fertilizers essentially provide nitrogen into the soil. You can see here, so that ammonium nitrates like that, and that gets absorbed by plants. And as plants grow from it, herbivores consume the plants, they grow, we eat the potential herbivores, we might eat the plants that absorb the nitrogen. So this is a really important element of the periodic table. But the other thing we need to focus on is the actual bond between two nitrogen atoms. So between two nitrogen atoms, you can see, is a triple bond. Now, as much as we want nitrogen to be given to, say, plantations and all that stuff, this triple bond is incredibly strong. And it doesn't break down very easily. What we want to do is provide the individual nitrogens to the plants, but that can't be achieved if we just take it out of the atmosphere. We need to convert that nitrogen in the atmosphere, which is the structure you see here. We need to convert it into a structure where it's easier to break the nitrogen apart and feed it into the plants. And so that's kind of the function of what Haber did. He also worked with a guy called Bosch. So this is Bosch and this is Haber. They created an experiment where they could create this triple bond nitrogen into a single bond nitrogen that could be used more regularly. So let's have a look. The Haber process is a reaction where we get hydrogen gas. I'll write that down. We get hydrogen gas reacting with nitrogen. And it forms ammonia. Now the structure of ammonia you can sort of see here already. We go from a triple nitrogen bond to a single nitrogen-hydrogen bond. So it's a lot weaker in that sense there. Now that we've created this single bond, we can use this ammonia to react with other chemicals that we can then use to, make our fertilizers and what the original intention was, to make explosives. So we'll come back to this one here. Here you see a chemical known as ammonium nitrate. Now ammonium nitrate, this is the overall structure of it. It's sort of like a white powder. It's created when we react ammonia, so from the Haber process, with nitric acid to make ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate, one of its main use is in fertilizers, but it is also used in explosive. And this is the point I want to try and make very clear. At the very start of the creation of the Haber process, it was actually designed to be used as explosive just right after the First World War, or during the First World War. So there's that. So what actually happens is the ammonia nitrate, it will decompose and it will generate this reaction here to make nitrogen 2, water and oxygen. Now in this reaction there is an incredible amount of energy that is released. You can also see in this state here, the ammonia nitrate is a solid. When it decomposes at 230 degrees, okay, it generates nitrogen gas, water vapor, a gas, and oxygen gas. Now if you have all these gases containing a very, very small volume of space, we know one of the main features of gases is they want to spread as far away as possible. So they want to expand their motion. They don't necessarily expand themselves, or the particles don't expand, but the area in which they want to move does. And so that kind of accumulated effect of these gases trying to move away from each other, that is the thing that gives the explosive effect of explosives. Nowadays, we don't really use ammonium nitrate for explosives anymore. We use it mostly for fertilizers. And it is quite an important process because using fertilizers actually ensures the survival of a lot of different places around the world, because not every country will have the same quality of soil to plant and to grow their crops. I want to show another little graph here. So this is sort of the reason why nitrogen can be so explosive. Now we're talking about the nitrogen compound, and the main objective, and this is kind of strange, but we actually want to get the single bond nitrogen compound back into a double bond nitrogen compound. The reason being is by forming the triple bond, we actually increase a huge amount, or we release a huge amount of energy into the surroundings. You can see sort of the energy conversions here. The reactants have all this energy in it, and then as it forms the triple bond, as you can see here in this spot here, this difference in energy has to be released as energy. So that's where the huge amount of energy comes through when we create these bonds here. The other thing, and if you actually look at it, that would imply that this reaction is somewhat exothermic. The other thing is, by forming the nitrogen gas and all the different gases will want to expand. And so from that really quick expansion, we get shock waves. So that's why nitrogen was seen as a great fuel source for explosives. Okay, so this is the general equation to represent the Haber process. And again, if you think about it, this actual chemical reaction is so incredible in the way that you can use nitrogen from the air, which is so unreactive, to make it into a material that can react with other things in the world. That is quite an incredible thing. The other important part is, disregarding the fact that they made it into explosives and it was used in the world wars, This has created fertilizers that can allow for growth of crops in many different parts of the world that might not be able to grow any crops at all. Mind you, the fertilizer isn't the only thing that ensures that we get better plant growth, but it is a critical component. It is exothermic, hence that's why the release of, or that's why the change in enthalpy is a negative value. These are some of the conditions to allow for the Haber process to work the most efficiently. So we generally put it in a reactor from 400 to 450 degrees Celsius. We put it in a 200 atmospheric pressure, just to point out the normal conditions. Right now, if you're watching this video in your room, we are living under a 1 atmospheric pressure system here. So what that 200 actually means is we're applying a pressure 200 times stronger than what you are experiencing right now whilst you watch this video. You might also be wondering what this equation, or what this little funny arrow thing is. It is called the reversibility arrow. And this is an example of equilibrium. Equilibrium just means that the rate of reaction forward and backwards is equal. If we're going in this direction, that is our forward reaction. If we're going backwards, this is our backwards reaction or reverse reaction. Okay, so there's that. Obviously, we want to prioritize the reaction going forwards. We won't really discuss how we can do that because you would need to understand how equilibrium works, but we will talk about how can we make this reaction occur faster. And these are some of the ways you can do it. One, you can increase the gas pressure. If you increase the gas pressure, that's the same thing as saying you reduce the amount of space or the volume the particles nitrogen and hydrogen can be in, so that increases their probability of colliding with each other. You could also increase temperature. Temperature always plays a part in making these particles react a lot quicker because it means that they have more kinetic energy to collide. It means they can overcome the energy barrier. But this, you would do it with a bit of an asterisk here. The reason being is this reaction is exothermic. Increasing temperature actually causes the reaction to go back this way. So if I increase temperature, it actually causes my reaction to go back this way. So we can increase the temperature slightly to make the reaction occur a bit faster, but we wouldn't do it necessarily too high because that will actually cause us not to get any ammonia. So we don't want that. The last one is to introduce a catalyst. This just allows our particles to orientate in the correct position, so that lowers the activation energy for collision. And we want that. We want to make it easier to cause chemical reactions. Okay, so we know what temperature does. If we give our particles more energy, a higher temperature, that means that when they are colliding, that they might be higher than the actual activation energy. If they are higher than the activation energy, we will get a chemical reaction. Okay, so that's kind of the benefit of having temperature there. As I said before, decreasing the temperature of the reaction vessel will actually be the way to increase the amount of ammonia we get, but it will decrease the rate of reaction. But if we increase the temperature, we actually lower the amount of ammonia we could get. So the compromise is actually 400 to 450 degrees Celsius. That's the industrial standard that they use. The other one we talked about was pressure. Now, if you can see here, increasing pressure of gases is the same thing as saying I'm going to reduce the volume in which they can move. By increasing the pressure of the reaction vessel, you make the gas molecules collide more. And so the nitrogens and hydrogens, they're going to try and collide with each other a lot more than the ammonias. And so that's why that will allow for a reaction to occur a lot faster and also help us produce more ammonia. Obviously, we can't take the pressure too high. the actual industrial standard is around 200 atmospheric pressure. There's just a couple of things that prevent us from going any higher. One is the actual expense of producing a really high pressure system and maintaining it, and then obviously we are dealing with gases in confined spaces. If the pressure is too high, the gas can actually cause explosions and blow up the reaction vessel we have. So that's why we have sort of like a standard number that's not too high. Then we have the catalyst. You can see here, we've talked about what the catalyst does. This is actually what it effectively does. It causes the bonds between the hydrogens and nitrogens to break itself apart, and then it helps them rearrange to form NH3, or ammonia for another way of putting it. So you can see how they kind of come together. This does make the activation energy of the reaction a lot lower because, you know, if you're already in the correct orientation, you don't need that much energy upon collision. Everything fits very well. The actual catalyst we use is an iron or iron oxide catalyst with small amounts of potassium oxide and aluminium oxide. Again, it effectively lowers our activation energy. It doesn't make it so that we produce more ammonia, but it does mean that the rate in which ammonia is produced could be a lot faster. Anyhow, this is the actual summary of the Haber process conditions. So the ideal conditions, or if we want to, these are the actual conditions, I'll use them here. We want a low temperature, a low concentration, as in a high gas pressure, so I might just put that there. So low gas pressure, but that means also a high gas pressure. Okay. We want a good catalyst. Usually it's a cheapish catalyst, so that's just the way it is. The actual conditions we use is 400 to 450 degrees Celsius, 200 atmospheric pressure, and then we use an iron catalyst there. Okay, so I thought it'd be most appropriate to come back to this little animation to represent the Haber process to end this lesson. Like I said, this is one of the most important chemical reactions that was established in human history. Might not be the most important, but it's definitely up there with one of the most important ones there. If you like a video like these, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time when we explain other scientific concepts.